All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we should be about ready to begin. You should be able to see my slides. I've got a couple of other tabs open for later. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Posit ecosystem and some of the enterprise use cases. This is a really broad topic, so I'm going to first just outline some of the Posit products, then a couple of the architectures, and then I'm actually going to dive into some demos and see how those go to sort of demonstrate some of the enterprise practices or just best practices. And there's no way it'll cover everything, so feel free to use the Q&A to send in some questions and maybe even to suggest further topics for another time. I'm sure you're all familiar with Jumping Rivers by now, but nonetheless, for anyone new, we're a data science consultancy up in Newcastle, but we're working worldwide. I've been with Jumping Rivers for about 8 years, leading the engineering department, and we do everything around data science. We were born of training, really, so we teach statistics, programming, things like that. And now we've developed into various consultancy, helping you do your data science, or even building the infrastructure and maintaining that for you. And that leads us to today, where we're talking about some of the Posit infrastructure that's out there that can really help your data science environment and journey. In the engineering team, we do a few things. So I'd just like to tell you about that before I get into some examples. The journey might begin with a health check. That could be fairly basic. Maybe we can't have access to anything and you just share a couple of config files with us, and we can then review them for best practices, get a vague idea of the system. But of course, it's much better if we can run some of the built-in tests that come with the Posit products, or even some of our own tests that we've developed. And that gives us a good understanding of the functionality of a system. If we can gain access, then the health check would have some manual tests we'd do. And maybe you have some specific known issues. Maybe you want us to look into the architecture in general. Or maybe we want to put some time towards fixing some things. Either way, that lets us move on to providing support, for example, for your system, or just giving you some sort of verification of how well it's working and being deployed. Or perhaps we might move on to designing something for you. The first stage here really is making sure we find all of your stakeholders, because we want to know who your IT is it in-house, is it third party, who manages governance, what your end users going to be doing, who manages the products, so that we can understand the full journey, all of the requirements. And so the design would have a few sessions, either with engineers or with data scientists at Jumping Rivers, so that we can understand all of your technical needs, your practical needs, any current issues that you're having. And that will end up with our design recommendations and an actionable project plan, so that we know how best we can support you or move forwards, which may well be deploying some infrastructure and then maintaining it. So we'd work very closely with your IT team, in-house or third party, to make sure we provision everything. We'll then configure it, be responsible for that, test it, some of our testing, some user testing. And once it's deployed, we'll support the onboarding of the users onto the new system, perhaps even including some content migration from another platform you might have been on. And once it's up and running, we'd be wanting to make sure that you've got a regular support and maintenance in place. But whatever it is that we've done, then we would be able to provide support. That's both for the IT teams on your side and also for your end users. And that gives you access not just to our engineers, but also our data scientists. And we'll facilitate all of that through the engineering team. And today, I covered this at the start, but let's go over it. We'll cover the Posit ecosystem, very high level, because there's a lot of components, a lot of features, but hopefully you'll see that I'll show you some of the quite interesting ones today. You can send questions. You should be able to send them right now. Let's see. None have come in yet, but send throughout. I'll either pick them up at the end or, if appropriate, between demos or at the end of a section. I might cover some of those questions. I've prepared a couple of demonstrations. I set up a server yesterday so that we can go through a few examples of some of the Posit features that have been quite useful for us and for our customers. And of course, if there is anything that we don't cover that you're interested in, let us know, because we can probably create another workshop or session about that. So first of all, some Posit team products. You're probably familiar with some of these. The RStudio IDE, that's been a very popular environment for working with R, as well as other languages like Python. The next one is VS Code. I actually use that a lot of the time. I do a lot of my work through VS Code. We've got Jupyter, that's Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Lab, and there's a variety of platforms. They're not just for Python. You can plug in a lot of different kernels. And the final one you may not be familiar with right now, that is the Positron logo. That's a fork of VS Code, but it brings in a lot of the really nice features from RStudio. So you get the plot viewer, the help viewer. You can see what variables are currently in memory. There's nice extra panes from the RStudio panel. And we'll probably see Positron briefly today, but you can download that and play with it yourself. Within these, obviously, there's more than the two languages, R and Python, but R and Python are very popular languages that you're probably familiar with. And then the drivers. Posit officially support and provide drivers for all of these databases, but you probably know quite well that you can plug in almost any database in your R and Python code. But nonetheless, you get some nice integrations with these drivers here. And I will briefly click on a button that brings those up a little later. So if you're familiar with or using any of these, then that is all covered by Posit Workbench. This is a server platform that your users will log into, and then they'll be able to gain access to those IDEs, those languages, those drivers. Perhaps you're more interested in Posit Connect or Package Manager, though. All of these components, they work together or they work separately. Workbench is the IDE platform. Connect is the publishing platform. So that's your APIs, your Shiny, your Quarto, PDFs, Bokeh, Dash, Plumber, Streamlit. There's quite a few, and it's constantly growing. Package Manager, I will give a quick demo of today, and that allows you to do some in-house package management. Maybe that is for providing a completely air-gapped system, but you need access to some of PyPy or CRAN, or maybe it's so that you can curate those third-party sources or upload some of your own packages for internal use. This is a very short list of features, but I thought I'd talk about a couple of these before we get into some demonstration. When you're using these server products, that gives you the opportunity to have a common configuration across them, validate everything. So that means that once you've identified the packages you need in Workbench, you know that you will have exactly the same experience on Connect. You can make sure that you've got the same network connectivity between Workbench and Connect. It really helps in diagnosing things when we have a similar Workbench and Connect environment, because then we know that we can test all that network connectivity, system dependencies, configurations, and it's much more similar between our development environment and our publishing environment. Of course, you can set up integrations within Workbench, so everyone that uses it, doesn't matter where they are or what device they're on, they'll be able to access their data sources, maybe some file shares, maybe some APIs. Of course, they can use their own authentication, their existing enterprise SSO. So if you go for SSO, there's no additional passwords needed. You just click to log in. I have set up SSO on the demo, although it's mostly going to appear as just a quick flash when I click the login button, because I won't need to type in my passwords again. This goes quite a bit deeper. I won't be able to touch on all of it, but you can pass through these authentications to Databricks, Snowflake, AWS, Azure, Kerberos to pre-authenticate you a little bit further. And of course, once you're on a central system, you can monitor it, you can enable auditing, you can make sure that you deploy one environment that users have a lot more freedom in, and then another environment for production, for public viewing, that is far more locked down, stricter controls, and you can meet any sort of reproducibility requirements, validation requirements that you might need. But how would you deploy those? What I've actually gone for in my demo is a single server. So I've installed everything onto one server. A better practice would be to separate them though. Then you know that Package Manager, when it loads everything into memory, isn't going to affect your workbench. You know that workloads on Workbench done by developers and analysts isn't going to affect published content on Connect that other people might be using in production. So a better practice is separating out those servers. When you separate them out, you now have quite a bit of flexibility. So you might decide not just have 3 servers, but to have 4 and give yourself an extra staging server for Connect or an extra staging server for Workbench with looser restrictions. This now means that you've got different environments that meet your different needs within the workspace, and you can allow different groups access to those systems. You can also start thinking ahead. We can start thinking about scalability in the future or making this more robust. And as long as you separate out your database backend that is used by the Posit products, as well as your storage, you've now kept that separate from the VMs. You can scale those VMs up. You can move to the third type of deployment far more easily if your database and storage is separate. And even with the VM-based setup, you can already make use of Workbench remote job scheduling. So you can send off your jobs from Workbench or even start your sessions inside Kubernetes or Slurm, even though your front ends are just set up on virtual machines. So you might be ready to scale up from just a big single node and now have multiple nodes per product. With your database and file systems external, you can fairly easily do that and run multiple servers per product. Or if you're ready for Kubernetes, if you've got some in-house Kubernetes, or you're ready for the additional features that Kubernetes can provide you, you can migrate the entire suite of products into a Kubernetes deployment. Whichever route you do take, we've always found something bespoke to really enhance the benefits of the deployment for people. This might be something like tying in access controls to something unique. Maybe it's just some custom branding for someone, or maybe a few custom integrations. But one of the more important reasons is often to make sure that we match the in-house expertise. Depending on the role, are we maintaining it? Are you maintaining it? We want to make sure that the design is actually suitable for any of the responsibilities that remain on your side. And I am about to go into some demos, but let's just have a quick look and see if there have been any questions. That is as much as I will be talking today about the infrastructure specifically. Yes, you can use Slurm as a backend. So that would be Workbench hooking it into a different job launcher. You can grow, you can adapt as you go. You can deploy Workbench as a single node. You can do your compute and your sessions locally. You can then add on a backend compute, whether that's using the CLI you might already be familiar with or integrating it into Workbench so that when you click Start Session, you can now choose to run it locally on this VM or remotely on your Slurm or Kubernetes environment. And you can also hook into other environments like Databricks for your compute as well. There's quite a few features. Okay. Package Manager doesn't always get the love it deserves. but it's quite a nice interface. If you want to curate your packages and manage them, then it's really good for that. If you want to self-host your private ones with a nice interface and not just upload them to a Git repo, then it can help you with that. So I'm going to have a quick run through Package Manager for those that aren't familiar with it. And this will be quite high level. So here we've got Package Manager set up with a CRAN mirror. So I've got a full mirror of CRAN. It'll be lazy loading, so it's not used up hundreds of gigabytes yet, but it will. I can have a quick look at the usage of the packages. So you can see that I've already installed packages about 800 or 900 times since yesterday, deploying various bits of content. I can see what's in use. I can see which licenses those were. As a user, I can have a look at what is available, because this might not be a full mirror of CRAN. So I can see here a quick copy paste to install it if I need that. Particularly useful when we're managing servers is this bit that tells me which dependencies I'll need on my system. So that can help out the sysadmin that needs to do something on the back end before you can actually install your dependency. You might want to set this up so that it's always pulling the correct packages for you. So by clicking on Setup, you can get something which might be familiar for you. If you've set your R CRAN mirrors previously in an R profile, you can just drop that in to use this new package manager. And as an admin, this is the dependencies for everything on CRAN. If I had a curated list, this would show me the dependencies for my curated list. So I can make sure that these packages are going to work for all my users when they come in and install something. If I've got some of my own packages, I can upload those from a Git repo, or I can upload them manually, and I'll get just the same sort of interface and features, little README. And coming soon, we will be getting some more uses of custom metadata. Look out for that. I'll show you a quick demo of the security vulnerabilities coming up as well. I'm actually going to go a little further and hop into Workbench. Here's my single sign-on, so I shouldn't need to do much. Excellent. And then I've got a little package manager demo set up in Positron. We will just load this session. So this will look familiar to VS Code, although it does have a lighter theme by default. I'm sure I can change that, but I haven't needed to. This is going to work quite nicely because I have Package Manager running on the same server as Workbench. There is a remote CLI, so you don't need it on the same server, but I'll be able to update Package Manager from this Positron session. Okay, I'll just make sure I can run the RSPM CLI, which I can. This is because I've given myself permission to do these admin tasks. Users don't suddenly have free reign over Package Manager. You have to give them permission. So you may have noticed there's only CRAN up here, and I want to add some Python. So I'm going to create a new repository. I'm calling it PyPy. It could be called anything. We can see that we now have PyPy, and it is empty. I'm going to subscribe it to a PyPy mirror. And now we have access to PyPy. Obviously, it's a little bigger than 0 packages, so it might take a few seconds to load the first time. There we go. And just the same way as we could manage our packages or view them, we've now got PyPy. And of course, there's Bioconductor as well. And that is the start of Package Manager. I think the biggest thing I might have missed, the biggest things would be curation, and of course, adding your own packages so that you can upload and use them, share them internally, use them in your deployed content. Okay, back to the slides. Yes, reviewing usage, managing subscriptions, binaries. That is a really important one. Couldn't really demo that because that's just something that happens in the background. But by using any package manager mirror instead of CRAN, you get much quicker installation of your R packages because binaries are provided for most of the systems. That's why I was selecting operating system at one point. And that makes deployments to Connect much quicker. It even reduces the number of system dependencies that you need. Let's see, any questions about Package Manager? Not every package has a binary available. So you might be on an operating system that doesn't yet have a binary built, or it might just be one of your own packages. If it's one of your own, in most cases, it probably doesn't actually need any compiled integrations unless you have built some sort of C integrations to your R package. If it's just R script, then source is fine. But a lot of the packages we use for heavy lifting, they have tighter integrations into system libraries for like matrix multiplication, doing your analysis. So they rely on system dependencies. And so those are much quicker with binary. But if it's just R code in the package, then source is pretty much the same as binary in that case. So you would definitely be using source packages a fair bit of the time. All right. Now I'm going to go through Connect a little bit. And I can cheat on this slightly. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Here's Connect. So I've got the same login system. It's single sign-on. And what I mean about cheating, you may have seen the jump start if you've been using Connect, and then you probably disable it so it doesn't pop up every time. These are zip files you can download. But we now have really easy access to a gallery of examples. I can just install these with a single click, and it's ready already. So loads of examples. That was super quick to deploy. And I would like to show you a couple of these. So there's a few in the extensions category. They're basically the same in terms of what they are. Installing them has made them visible just to me. So this one calls back to Package Manager. And this is an app that will scan for vulnerabilities. So it'll make use of Package Manager. And it will use my credentials because I've deployed it. It's only visible to me. And it will show content that may have some vulnerabilities. So I've set this server up with an old version of Jupyter Lab. And so this is flagging because this scanner itself is using Python. And so it is flagging up that if I update to 4.4.8, I will be safe from this particular security issue. You can configure it to do more than just my own vulnerabilities. You obviously would be wanting to scan the entire system for everyone's content to make sure it's secure. But that is working with a combination of Package Manager's database and the features built into this app. If I go back to the content, you can see what I've been deploying. There was the vulnerability scanner using Fast API. User metrics is a very common request from people. So you do have some basic metrics in the sidebar, like really basic. There we go. But there's an API behind that. And so this app has been built on that API. And you can see this time it is showing all content. And I can see this is the one I've been messing with the most. And I'm the only viewer because I'm the only one on this server, but nonetheless. This is actually using another really nice feature. I'm just going to delete this feature and it'll prompt us. So Connect has these integrations. So the previous app, that was using my credentials because I deployed it. This one is going to use the viewer's credentials. So I could make this accessible to everyone, and whoever visits it, they will be using their own permissions on Connect, so they'll only be able to see their content. And that is the beginning of a much nicer way to manage the security of your content. And they will come back to that in another demo shortly. This is already demo 2 of 3. So let's see what else we have in the examples. We've got Tableau integrations. We've got Quarto. I do have a Quarto demo. That is my final one. I've got some Jupyter, Bokeh. Yeah, lots of things. You can click one button and then it'll deploy for you to have a look at and play with. So the demo that I created for myself. So I wanted to show another integration. So the built-in one that lets you act as any other authorized viewer. That's pretty handy, but your data is probably not on Connect. I've used GitLab as my data source. It might make more sense to you to be thinking of databases as your data source. I'll just jump to the admin page, system, integrations, add. So I don't know if the pop-up appears on the screen share, but we've got Azure, SharePoint, Google Sheets, Google Drive, Databricks, Salesforce, Snowflake. These are all things built in that you can set up so that a viewer comes along, approves the access for their account, and they are now interacting with your app using their credentials. For GitLab, I selected custom, and I've done this with quite a few different OAuth platforms. Almost everything provides OAuth so that I can hook in and grab data. So there's my GitLab one. This code is not particularly clever. I just grabbed it from the documentation. So these products, they host their own documentation, which is really handy because you know it's going to be for the correct version. And so I've just grabbed this. This isn't a token that I have. I don't know the secret. I don't have to feed in any secrets. This comes through that integration. And if I just republish the content, we should see my GitLab details. There we go. And they're not my details from Connect. These are my details from GitLab because I've hooked them together. And there's a page that you only see once. So I've added it to the presentation. There we go. You'll probably have seen this in loads of places. Do you want to let Google see this? Do you want to let Facebook see it? So you get to approve it. And then you know that my Shiny app or my Python app can read my profile details or access my database and use it for the functionality. And this is just a really big deal for making sure your apps are secure because you no longer have to trust your logic that a developer has written into the Shiny app. You just write it to access whatever data it can access. And then by using the viewer's credential instead of your own, you know that that viewer will only be able to see whatever that viewer is meant to be able to see in the databases. And if that means they only have read-only access to a certain database, great. You know that nothing that would make changes is going to happen if that user is not allowed to make those changes. So that Connect demo, you can probably see there are many features I've not touched on about managing content, scaling up the processes. But I really want to just show what some of the most useful features in a generic workflow have sort of been. And if there are no questions right now, my last demo is that most risky one. So let's have a go. I'm going to close a few of these. I'm going to jump back to Workbench Home. And I'm going to grab some data. I'm using pins sort of as an example. It means I don't have to go anywhere else. Pins as a package, it's not just a connect feature. You can hook pins into S3 buckets or websites or other data sources. But what I have here, again, just grabbed it from the pins docs from the front page. I'm grabbing the MT-Cars dataset, which you can have a quick browse of. And then I am saving that into Connect. I'm calling it MT-Cars. There we go. So if I just jump over to Connect, back to my content, that is a data set. This was already here, but you can see that the update was just a few seconds ago. So this is 32 rows of MT-Cars data, which I'll use in a moment. If I just uncomment this and filter just to Gear 4, my data is now only 12 rows. So I've done something to the data. And I can give permission to whoever I want on Connect to view this data or to push updates to this data. And that can be very useful when we're keeping our data separate from our application code. We don't want to be pushing, I've not had to bundle this into my app, but this could be a database anywhere. This is just a nice all-in feature. So now to use it. This time, I'm going to start a new project. Sure, I'll save. New directory, let's grab a quick Quarto. Already got a report, so we'll call this report 2. Now we can use the code editor or the visual editor. I do like Markdown, but I also quite like this visual editor. It produces some fairly clean Markdown on the other side. So one thing I'm going to add immediately, so I'm going to insert a call out. Yeah, a note will be fine. Updated on, let's hope I didn't make a typo. Let's have a look at my report. There we go. Good. So whenever this is rendered, it'll grab the date. I know you could have done that in the title at the top, but I thought I'd do it in a little blue call out. You could put whatever you want in there. And this report isn't doing much. We could grab a connection. So I don't have any of these databases set up, but by adding all the pro drivers, I now have a somewhat nicer interface. I don't have to remember exactly how to write the connection string. This isn't real, so the test won't work. But it has given me some code that I can copy and paste. DB connection. And then I'd use that however I usually wanted to use it. You see the password here, but I want to publish this. So I'm actually going to grab a password from an environment. So this is fairly standard way. Whatever your secrets are, we can add them as environment variables, because I never want to be typing these into my code. So let's publish this with the source code so it can run. I could add an environment variable, but I can also do that later if I forget, like I just did. You can obviously use some logic or the config package to pull this conditionally from an environment or from a file locally. We can see that we don't have a password yet, but I can add one. And say, yep, I'm going to make some changes. I will re-render this because it's not an app. It doesn't render every time I visit. It renders when I request it to. We now have a password that could be used. So I just copy and paste the get end down here, or do something similar to feed a password in. And no one can see this password unless they deliberately print it. If I have access to this content, even I can't see the password that I set in there. So I can, in theory, if this was doing something, that's why we added the updated on, I might want it to run every day. So this is now set as schedule, and I haven't set up email on this server, but if I had, we can even send an email version of it, or conditional emails if something fails or a certain property is met. And I have a report with full history, so we've got 2 versions so far that can be sent out to people that opt in. So I can unsubscribe myself if I wanted, and then I can receive updates if it fails every day on a condition, perhaps even with an attachment, like a PDF version or something like that. Okay. I did say I would come back to the pins, and that is exactly what I'll do next. So this is a report, but it could be an app. And I'm not wanting to upload my data with the report or the app. So how am I going to get some pins data? I still have it open. So again, I can just copy paste. Nice. I publish that. I'll probably wait for it to tell me. So that's all I needed to do to grab some data. And that data is, they're both on Connect, but they're kept separate. And then we have different owners, different collaborators, different permissions. I could pull different versions if I needed to. But now I have something nicely isolated from the data elsewhere. Could make that a little bit nicer, perhaps. Let's just make it a little more. By default, this doesn't have the interactive filters, but we could just wrap it in cable or GT to give more of a nice report. Something interactive for people online, something PDFable for people just checking their emails. Okay. There's one big workflow feature. Even though it's quite nice, I've separated things, I've scheduled things. What I've not yet used here is Git deployment, because that makes the demos a lot slower. But ideally, I wouldn't just add someone's name to the access and give them ability to push it to my same app. I would be publishing my source codes to Git. Remember, there's no secrets in it, so there shouldn't be any problems. There's no data in it, so it won't be taking up loads of space in Git. And then Connect can pull from Git, and we'll use Git as our method of sharing and collaborating on the same bit of content. But Git will have to be for another time. The last comment I'll make, it doesn't just have to be the report I schedule. I could have, and many people do, create scheduled content that will actually produce the pins or update the pins or update your database. It doesn't have to be a pin. So you can use the schedule for running jobs that need to be regularly run, as well as creating nice, pretty outputs. Okay, that was my third demo. So we are pretty much onto the exclusive questions. Yeah, so I tried to introduce the separation of data. We're making use of the products to give everyone a central space to work in. No extra passwords, they just got single sign-on. We can manage the compute resources by scaling up nodes or giving more nodes or shifting the whole thing into a scalable platform. We're encouraging our users to make use of Git, which I would love to show more about, but I'm sure someone else can tell you about Git if you're not already using it. Package Manager can pull from Git, Connect can pull from Git. You get integrations with VS Code and RStudio IDE and Positron to make it quite easy to work with Git. Then we've built up a workflow with some schedules, some emails. I didn't show you many of the output types, but I'm sure you could imagine how useful it could be to not just generate that page, but also a Word document or a PowerPoint or a PDF from these outputs. And that's partly with the help of Quarto, but any other tool that you can find, probably find a way to make use of it. And hopefully that has shown you some of the nice features to set up an environment. Now that it is in the cloud or on-premise, you can scale it as you need to. You can hook in your existing authentication so that everyone can just click to join. You can set up one environment that everyone can play with, a separate environment that only a few trusted publishers are allowed to play with. You can make sure that things are identical so that you can validate them. And of course, keep an eye out for more of those vulnerability scanning integrations and the metadata in Package Manager and things like that, as well as some of the Posit Connect Kubernetes features. Features are being added quite quickly, and they will continue to make this platform more validatable, more robust, more reassuring. And of course, you can use any of the components that you want and hook them into the rest of the data science world. There are a lot of integrations out there, and you can use whichever bits that you want to. So hopefully I inspired some ideas, even if you don't yet have too many questions for me. I do have some of our other engineers here as well, if there's something I can't directly answer. Can I go back to the first slide? This slide will do. So thank you everyone for coming. Does it need lots of storage? Not necessarily. It will lazily mirror your packages. So if you're running it in an environment where it's on the internet, it has access to the internet, it will only download things that it needs to. And you will find that a lot of the packages people use will be the same package. So you shouldn't need too much initially. You can deploy in an air-gapped situation, and then you do want to give it enough space to mirror all of CRAN, all of PyPy, if that's what you're going for. When should you not use a pin? Thanks, Colin. When the data gets quite big, you should probably use a database. Whether or not that is at the point of hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes, it will work. It's a very handy feature. But if your data is getting big, whatever that means to you, you should probably be using a database or an API to connect to. And if you can use one of those integrations, then you can still make use of those nice. Make someone else responsible for the permission management. If not, you can use whatever you're used to in your Python and R code to connect to your data sources. Just going to clean up. Is there anything there's so much I missed. Of course there is. Yeah. You can probably send us ideas offline if there are topics that you would like us to cover more about. Well, I won't keep you all hanging on if we don't get more questions. Let's see how far back we go for the first slide. There we go. Well, thank you again, everyone, for attending. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. We quite enjoy all of the things data science. I will hopefully see some of you again later.